Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. And today we're doing the sequel to last week's book, Black Gryphon, with White Gryphon, which picks up a few years after the last book. 10 years, in fact. So what happens in this book is that the refugees from the end of the Mage Wars, they fled through gates to the south. And the reason this book is called White Gryphon is twofold. The first is that at the end of the war, at the end of the last book, Scandranan Rashkai, who was the Black Gryphon, mostly because he had himself constantly dyed all black, Scan, when he was fleeing and he was the last through the through the gates, magical power in the world of Valdemar has a bleaching effect. The longer you work with mage energies, the faster your hair turns white. It also turns your eyes blue. Well, Scan went through and it bleached him from black to white, except for a few dark tips, in basically one go. He just got blasted with mage energies and barely made it out. But he has turned into a White Gryphon, which is why he now sort of gets called and goes by the White Gryphon when people are being melodramatic about him. Well, the other reason is because when they fled, they found themselves eventually at the base of a very large white cliff, which they basically built their city into the cliffside. And so, because it was a city built into a cliffside and the way that it looked when people would step back from it, they said, wow, this looks like a griffin with its wings outstretched, and so they named their city White Gryphon after the cliffs and its shape. And so when this story begins, I mean, it opens with the expulsion, banishing from the city of a man named Hadanalith, who later, comes back and turns up as a villain, which, we all expect because foreshadowing, and why would you bother talking about it if he wasn't going to come back, especially with his perspective, especially with his point of view made so very explicit and lengthily described in this opening chapter. But they get, what happens is they are approached by the people of the Emperor of the Haighlei, the Black Kings, that they found that it turns out that they were sort of on the northernmost edge border of the lands of the Emperor of the Haighlei. And yes, the wordplay of they're the Haighlei, they're Haighlei what, it does get made. But anyways, so they get approached by them, and after some back and forth manage to establish diplomatic relations, but it's a very, very delicate process for several reasons, not least of which that the Haighlei are very, they have a very sternly regimented society. They not only have a caste system, which is stern and unbending, and one of those beliefs in reincarnation that you will be born into a higher caste next time round. But they also have a way of life such that there are correct forms for committing murder and correct forms for assassination. And when people step outside of those forms and norms, the way you do things, the way you conduct an affair, the way you take revenge on your husband for cheating you has a correct social form. And when people step outside of those norms, they very often don't know what to do precisely because they have a rule for everything. And if somebody breaks the rules, they're not quite sure how to handle it because sometimes, even though there are ways to break there are, there are official rule breaking rules for how you break rules. Like there's a specific kind of formality to their society. And so when they're faced with someone who doesn't do things that way, they really don't know how to handle it, and it doesn't really occur to them that anybody could do that. Um, Anyways, so when the people of White Gryphon arrive for negotiations, Scandranan has set himself up to pretend to be the king of White Gryphon, not because he particularly wants to be a leader or anything else, but because, strategically speaking, they figure he's exotic enough that they'll think of him as being maybe outside of their rules and cut the foreigners some slack. But what happens is that murders occur and are done in such a way as to implicate Scandranan, and then later to implicate Amber Drake, who is Scan's best friend and brother in all but blood, even though one of them is human and the other one is a half bird, half lion thing. Um, so, because, you can see he's a griffin. Griffins are exciting looking. I have also only copied pictures from the book that include not humans, because frankly, pictures of humans, although perhaps edifying, aren't actually all that interesting. Several of them are distinguished black men. Well, we know what a distinguished black man looks like. We know what a distinguished white woman looks like. We know what Native American, and all of these people are based roughly upon cultural outlines of, as one always does in fiction, especially fantasy fiction, these cultures, the Haighlei, are based roughly upon aspects of Southern African, Sub-Saharan African cultures, um, aspects of it, but expanded and blown up, and parts of it are feudal Japanese, and um, parts of the Kaled'a'in, who are sort of the predominant cultural group in White Gryphon, are very loosely based on Native American tribes with a leavening of some Western perceptions, and it's the usual thing of that sort. Anyways, so you do have a certain amount of culture clash there. You have the murder mystery that has to be solved. Um, so one of the things that makes this book a little easier to get into than Black Gryphon is that Black Gryphon starts with many lead characters very early on, and right off the bat, I mean, sure, that particular book is very much specifically about Scandranan and Amber Drake, but it starts off in the middle of an absolutely enormous war, a war on an epic scale with epic magical powers being thrown around. Um, and so there's an effort of getting into it that I have a friend of mine who tried it and had difficulty with it, even though she was a very big fan of Mercedes Lackey. She just had trouble. She had difficulty getting into that. So there's that problem. And then, but this one is easier because you've come to know the characters in the last book. And also the scale of this is much smaller, much more immediate. It's, a diplomatic contretemps between two clashing cultures, yes, but there's a limited number of actors in this. It isn't an epic war. It's, negotiations between one city and, one emperor, really. So it's much more controlled in that way. Now, as I said, I took pictures. Judith, Aubrey, and Snowstar don't actually play much of a role in this. They kind of show up at the end when Skendranon sends a call home, in effect, for people to back them up so that if everything goes sideways, they have a way to get home, meaning people to back them up and help them fight their way out. But, they show up in the book, and so Larry Dixon made a drawing. Aubrey is the Gryphon, Judith is the woman in the middle, and Snowstar is the mage on the right. Janelle is Skandranon's wife, his mate, which, his wife. And Kechara is the one on the top, and she is a developmentally disabled Gryphon with the most powerful telepathy ever. And she does play a key role in this, not only because she acts as a communications hub for people a bazillion miles away, because she can reach the distance between the Haighlei capital and White Gryphon, but also manages to save Scan's life when two of our villains decide they're going to, kill him and use him and stuff and all of those things that, villains who practice blood magic would do. And she basically flattens them by using her telepathy, because she sees that Papa Scan is in trouble and bad mans are out to get him. Janelle's just nice and commonsensical and you like her. She's a good character and well matched with Skendranon, who can't help but make a display of himself. This last one, Make, Jeston, and the twins. Jeston is the Hertazi, who is sort of their personal servant, sort of. Hertazi have kind of taken on the role of organizers and servants and doers. They seem to be naturally inclined to like building things and making things and cleaning things, so they kind of take on that role because they like to make the world organized. And so they do that, and the ones with magic make sure that because they are lizard people and will, not shrivel up in the cold, but they'll, go into a torpor like lizards do in the cold. So people with magic make sure that they always have warm places to live. The twins are, of course, Skendranon and Janelle's twins, who are looking particularly adorable in that picture. And Make she is one of the people of the Haighlei. She is a servant who plays a particular key role in helping them maneuver socially. She plays a key role in helping them understand what's going on, and she's one of the few people there who treat Janelle and Skandranon's twins as being both intelligent and children, but also understands that they are, that they are children with giant scary beaks and stuff, because a lot of the people who were sent to help who would treat the twins not as children, but as large animals. And large animals, like lions, they're very, very self-sufficient much, much sooner than human babies are. And griffins have the same sort of mental growth rate as humans. And so their children aren't self-sufficient any sooner than regular humans are. And I am running out of time, so I will finish this up and see you all next week with the last book in the trilogy.